I love the Zelda series. And out of the main titles, I played through all but 3 games. Zelda 2, because it was too darn difficult. Zelda the Spirit Tracks, because I never even started it. And Skyward Sword, because I just couldn't get past the motion controls. I really wanted to like it back then, but unfortunately the controls just didn't work for me. I didn't like the way I had to control the remote beetle or the loft wing. Swinging the Wiimote around to fight enemies only worked half of the time. Especially the Skyward strike and stabbing were a pain, and I had to recalibrate my controller every couple of minutes. Paired with some other issues I had with it, which I'm gonna get into later, I got through around half of the game and then I just couldn't bring myself to launching it on the Wii anymore. When Skyward Sword HD featuring button controls was announced, I thought to myself, okay, the game may have had its issues, but if the control scheme works, I'm at least going to be able to play it properly. So I was carefully looking forward to it, as I also hate leaving things unfinished. Now having played through it, I can say that overall I really enjoyed it. The game now comes with both motion and button controls, but I played through it exclusively using the latter. And it works. Sorta. Instead of swinging your controller around to use your sword, you use the right analog stick to determine at which angle you attack. It's an unusual system, but it works most of the time. Stabbing attacks are now performed by clicking the right analog stick, much more pleasant than the stabbing motion with the Wiimote. Flicking the stick for quick strikes sometimes doesn't do anything at all for me, especially when I try to do several attacks in quick succession, and overall it can get a little annoying in heated situations. But it gets the job done surprisingly well. The beetle and loft wing are now controlled by simply moving the left analog stick, which is a huge step up to twisting your wrist. Yeah, I really hated that. Also, you finally have a camera that you can move around freely. However, since the right analog stick is already being used for attacking, you have to hold the L button and then move the right stick to look around. Again, it's a bit strange at first, but you get used to it. It's only problematic for me because I got this so deep into my system that it causes problems for me in other games. So the controls are good. But how's the game itself? Well, it feels nice to finally play a more classic 3D Zelda game again. Breath of the Wild was an amazing game, but where it fell flat was the dungeons. They were short, and they all basically had the same look and feel to them, which was a huge disappointment for me. In Skyward Sword, though, the proper Zelda dungeons are back. They have great puzzles to solve, it takes some time to beat them, and all have a unique style and feel, like they have their own lore behind them, which I always loved in the old 3D Zelda games. Exploring ancient dungeons always gives a nice sensation of being an adventurer, or an archaeologist even, and this game actually has some of the best dungeons in the series. The overworld, on the other hand, doesn't have a lot to offer. Actually, there isn't even much of an overworld, at all. Above the clouds you just fly around to get from point A to B, but there's not much to do, and it oftentimes feels like a chore to get through. Below the clouds there is no interconnected world. There are a couple of areas which feel like dungeons themselves. They're pretty much pre-dungeons. You have to solve some puzzles or do some busy work in order to advance to the actual dungeons. The game's story is pretty neat and features some really memorable moments and characters. The overall art style is good, the character designs are nice, and they're all recognizable. And I like that there are some charming details, like the shop owner guy. When you approach him he gets all excited, and when you turn away he does the most disappointed gesture ever. And there's just something about the visual of Link prancing over the plaza playing his little harp that puts a smile on my face. Speaking of the harp, I feel it's underutilized. And the way you play the harp, it doesn't really allow you to play any specific tunes. It's kinda nice how whatever you play matches the background music, but I miss how you used to play instruments in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, where notes were assigned to buttons. I hope they'll bring that back eventually. The soundtrack itself, though, is very, very good, and features some of my favorite tracks in the entire series, like the Ballad of the Goddess, for example. The town of Skyloft serves as a hub, and it's a sweet little town, with lots of little details and small things to discover. Even though from a lore perspective I'm a little bit confused. Like, is this really the entirety of Skyloft? Or is it just the main island, with other islands that are also inhabited, and you just don't see in the game? Because the town itself isn't all that big, and there aren't a whole lot of people around, which would make the gene pool rather small, and raise questions like, where does Link come from? Was he raised at the academy? Etc, etc. But I suppose it doesn't really matter, and probably shouldn't even be thought about too much. Something that was considered a big issue by many in the Wii version was Fi, your companion. Before she used to talk a lot. Like, she was supposed to give you advice, but what it boiled down to in most cases was something in the likes of her telling you that it's hot while you're literally on fire. Now most of her quote-unquote help is purely optional. Hooray to that. I think I have two big gripes with the game. First of all, in the game there are segments called the Silent Realm challenges, and these are extremely frustrating to me. You have to run around an area and collect 20 tears, all while the timer goes down. When you collect one of these tears, the timer goes back up. If it reaches 0, or if you're caught by one of those ghosty things that float about, the enemies in the area get activated, and they will chase you. If they hit you once, you have to start the entire challenge all over again. It's annoying, it's frustrating, and it's elements such as these that give me an unnecessary amount of anxiety that I do not particularly need in a Zelda game. Second are the monster designs, especially for some of the bosses. Everything looks so cute. Like, even the standard moblins and bokoblins. I mean, they're ugly, but in a cute sort of way. Something about the way they look just annoys me. I kinda like them, but at the same time I don't, because I feel like I can't really take them seriously. And for the bosses, there's just so much wasted potential. The two examples I'm about to give are quite infamous, and they are probably brought up in every other video about this game as well, but they really deserve to be talked about. The Sand Ship is such a great dungeon, but its boss Tantalus? Ugh. Just look at this build-up. You enter this room, and everything goes dark. Suddenly, giant tentacles start coming through the floor and walls. The ship begins to sink, and there's this great feeling of dread. Then you get to this door, and your companion Fi goes, the cause of all this is behind this door. The build-up is so high, and you expect some sort of Lovecraftian monster or a giant kraken. And then you see this. It's one of the biggest letdowns in the game. And the fight itself is also nothing noteworthy or challenging. And I don't even mind easy or simple boss fights, as long as they're fun or the design of the enemy itself is cool. It's a shame. And the other boss I wanted to mention has a similar problem. In the game's introduction, they tease you with this ancient evil. It's a dark, eyeless monstrosity that has a giant maw with razor-sharp teeth, and this creature is so dangerous that if it were to escape, it would mean the end of the world. Now this in itself could be quite frightening. But then you see the rest of its body. Why did they think that giving it Alf's lower body would be a good idea? And those wobbly toes? And the way it walks? It's like they took that creepy looking thing from the introduction and went out of their way to make it look as unintimidating as possible. And as with Tantalus, the fight is not exactly fun either. And what makes it even worse is that you have to fight it several times. I really don't understand the need to make everything look so cutesy. Yes, the game does look cartoonish, but that doesn't mean that the enemies have to look like jokes. Compared to even Wind Waker. This is a cute game. Like, almost everything about it is cute. But the designs are consistent, and the enemies are still intimidating, and you can still take them seriously. Look at the first boss Goma from that game. It fits the tone, but it's definitely not something you'd want to cuddle. I mean, there are some good enemy designs as well. The antagonist Girahim is a creepy weirdo, and the design reflects that perfectly. And the final showdown and boss fight, which I'm not going to spoil here, are really epic and cool. The design of the final boss is great and memorable, and the fight itself might be one of my favorites in the entire series. Despite my gripes, again, I do like the art style. It makes the graphics quite pleasant to look at, despite the game being 10 years old already. just a shame that so much looks inconsistent in my eyes. Overall, this HD re-release is a huge improvement over the Wii version, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you long for a more classic Zelda experience, and you had the same problems as me when it originally came out. I'm really glad I could finally finish it after all these years, and I suppose I should be playing Spirit Tracks next. Or finally beat Zelda 2. Or maybe not. Ah well, thanks for watching.